My name is Derek Hoffman, and I've been a Nevada State Police patrol officer for 17 years. I've seen it all on this desert highway between Reno and Las Vegas. Horrific accidents, high-speed chases, drug smuggling hidden in the most absurd places you can imagine. I thought nothing could surprise me anymore. I was wrong. It was 3 in the morning on a Saturday in October, the kind of early morning that makes you question your life choices while you're stopped on the side of the road, drinking your 5th reheated coffee of the night. The radio was quiet. Few people travel at this hour, and those who do are usually trying to get to some casino before dawn or returning home after a bad night at the poker tables. I saw the headlights approaching from about 400 meters away. Something was wrong. The vehicle was going too slowly, swaying slightly between lanes. It wasn't the typical zigzagging of a drunk driver, but there was something strange about the movement. I turned on my hazard lights and went after him. As I approached, I realized it was a Hearse, a black Cadillac from the 90s, one of those elongated models with tinted windows on the sides. The paint was faded, and there was a dent in the back. It didn't belong to any funeral home I knew in the area, and believe me, after so many years making this journey, you end up knowing all the commercial vehicles that circulate around here. I activated the siren. The Hearse didn't react immediately. It continued at that sluggish speed for another 200 meters or so before starting to pull over to the side of the road. That already set off a red flag in my head. Normal drivers stop as soon as they see the lights. Anyone who takes too long is either very scared or hiding something. I stopped the patrol car about 10 meters back and grabbed the flashlight. The body cam had been on since the start of my shift, as always. I checked the license plate in the system before getting out. The vehicle was registered to a certain Morrison Funeral Services from a county I'd never heard of in the southern part of the state. Nothing was listed as stolen or wanted. I descended slowly, keeping my hand near the vest where the gun was kept. The night was cold, that dry desert cold that cuts through the skin. There wasn't a soul on the road besides the two of us. Only the wind pushing small bushes across the asphalt and the distant hum of the power lines. I tapped on the driver's side window with my knuckles. It took about 5 seconds for the window to start going down, and it went down slowly, as if the electrical system was malfunctioning. A strong smell came from inside the car. It wasn't exactly the smell of decomposition you find at old crime scenes, but it had something chemical mixed with something organic that made my stomach churn. The driver was a thin man, probably in his 50s, with deep, dark circles under his eyes and several days' worth of stubble. He wore a rumpled black suit and a loose tie. He looked at me with a blank expression, almost as if he were in a trance. I asked for his driver's license and vehicle registration. He moved in slow motion, rummaging in the glove compartment with trembling hands. I noticed his fingernails were dirty, with something dark accumulated underneath them. While I waited, I shone the flashlight beam into the car's interior. The dashboard was dusty. There were empty coffee cups on the center console, and in the back seat there was an old backpack and some scattered papers. But what caught my attention was the glass partition separating the cabin from the rear of the vehicle, where coffins are usually kept during transport. The glass was cracked in several places and had what appeared to be handprints on the inside. He handed me the documents. The name on the wallet was Howard Morrison, the same last name as the registered funeral home. The photo looked like it had been taken years ago, when he still had color in his skin and some life in his eyes. I asked him to get out of the vehicle. Howard got out of the car with difficulty, almost tripping over his own feet. I asked if he had been drinking. He shook his head, but didn't say anything. I asked where he was coming from and where he was going. He mumbled something about a transport from Las Vegas to Reno. I asked the name of the deceased who was being transported. That's when he hesitated. He opened his mouth, closed it, looked back toward the rear of the hearse, then looked at me again. He said his name was John Whitmore, but he said it in such an unconvincing way that any police officer with 2 days' experience would know it was a lie. I asked to see the transport documentation. Everybody that crosses state lines needs specific paperwork, death certificates, permits, that sort of thing. Howard stood there, sweating profusely despite the low temperature. He said the papers were in the back with the body. I told him to open it. He didn't move. I asked again, this time more firmly. He took a step towards the back of the vehicle, stopped, turned to me and said something I will never forget. "Officer, you don't want to open this." It wasn't a request. It was almost a warning. I asked why not. He was silent for about 10 seconds, that seemed like an eternity. Then he spoke softly, almost whispering, "Because something is wrong. Something is very wrong." At that moment, my hand automatically went to the gun. I asked what exactly was wrong. He shook his head, as if he didn't know how to explain or didn't want to. I told him to stay where he was and that I would check it myself. I walked to the back of the hearse. The doors were the side opening type, with chrome metal handles worn by time. Before opening them, I heard it. It was faint, but it was there. A sound coming from inside. It wasn't the noise of something moving because of the vehicle's movement. It was rhythmic, like a tapping, as if someone were lightly tapping the inside of the coffin. My first reaction was rational. Someone was trapped inside, some horrible accident, a person who had been declared dead prematurely and woke up during transport. I had read about such cases, rare but real. I put my hand on the door handle and looked at Howard. He had his hands on his head, visibly panicked. I opened the doors. The interior was dark, illuminated only by my flashlight and the car lights. There was a simple, unadorned wooden coffin resting on a metal frame attached to the floor. The enamel was chipped in several places, and then I heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow knocks coming from inside the coffin. I called for backup on the radio immediately. My voice came out more strained than I intended. I also requested an ambulance, in case there was anyone alive inside, needing urgent care. The dispatcher asked what the emergency was. I said I wasn't sure yet. I climbed onto the back of the hearse. The smell was much stronger there. It wasn't. Formaldehyde? I know the smell of formaldehyde. It was something sweet mixed with mold and something my brain couldn't identify, but that instinctively disgusted me. I examined the coffin. It wasn't sealed with nails or screws. The lid was just snapped on. Tock, tock, tock. The banging continued. I placed my hands on the sides of the lid and took a deep breath. I counted to 3 mentally and stood up. What I saw made me instinctively recoil, almost falling from the back of the vehicle. Inside the coffin was a body. It was a man who looked to be between 30 and 40 years old, dressed in a cheap grey suit. His skin had that pale, waxy color typical of embalmed corpses. His eyes were closed. His hands were crossed over his chest, but one of the hands moved. It wasn't my imagination. I saw it. My fingers twitched slightly, then relaxed. My training fought against the primal panic that threatened to overwhelm me. I reached for my pulse to check for vital signs. His skin was cold, too. A cold, colder than any human skin should be. I couldn't find a pulse. I put my fingers on his neck. Nothing. But as I did that, I felt it. A vibration coming from inside his chest, as if something was stirring internally. The body opened its eyes. They weren't the eyes of someone waking from a catatonic state or emerging from a coma. They were the eyes of something that shouldn't be conscious. They were completely black, without irises, without white. Just 2 dark spheres that stared at me with an intensity that froze me. The mouth opened slowly, revealing stained teeth, and a sound came out. It wasn't a human voice. It was a high-pitched squeal, mixed with something that seemed to come from a throat full of liquid. I drew my weapon purely on instinct. The body didn't move to get out of the coffin, but the head turned toward me in a way that human heads shouldn't. That angle was wrong. I heard Howard shouting something outside, but I couldn't process the words. Then the body became still again. The eyes closed, the mouth shut, as if it were a puppet whose batteries had run out. I stood there, weapon in hand, waiting for the next move. Nothing happened. Silence returned, broken only by my panting breath and the wind outside. I got out of the hearse without taking my eyes off the coffin. Howard was sitting on the ground near the vehicle, hugging his knees. I asked him what on earth he was transporting. He lifted his face to me. Tears were streaming down his face. I didn't. No, I swear I didn't know. They paid me $5,000 to transport it without asking questions. They said it was just a normal body, that the family had specific preferences and wanted to avoid large funeral homes. It seemed legitimate. I asked who they were. He shrugged. A man who had contacted him by phone, identified himself as the deceased's brother, made an advance payment and gave the pickup address in Las Vegas. When Howard arrived, it was an empty warehouse in the Bar Industrial District. The coffin was already prepared, sealed, with instructions not to open it until it reached its destination in Reno. "But you opened it," I said. He nodded. "I heard the noises on the road. I thought it was just the body moving, gas, that kind of thing. But then it started getting louder, more insistent. I stopped at a rest area about 80 kilometers from here and opened it to check. And it was exactly as you saw it. Quiet, dead, but I swear I had just made those noises. I closed the coffin and kept driving, trying to convince myself I was imagining things. Then you stopped me. The reinforcements arrived 20 minutes later. 2 younger officers and an ambulance. I explained the situation as objectively as I could, but I could see from their looks that they thought I'd lost my mind. I don't blame them. If someone told me this story, I'd think the same. The paramedics examined the body. They declared no vital signs, extremely low body temperature. Rigor mortis present. All indications were that it was a corpse that had been there for at least 48 hours. One of them asked if I was absolutely sure of what I had seen. I pointed to the BODYCAM. The recording would show everything. We went back to the police station to review the footage. Howard was temporarily detained for questioning. The body was taken to the county morgue for autopsy. At the police station, we sat in the video review room. My supervisor was there, along with 2 other officers. We loaded the file from the BODYCAM and started watching it. I saw the whole encounter, the conversation with Howard, the opening of the coffin. The part where the body moves is on the recording. You can see it, but it's subtle, much more subtle than it seemed at the time. The hand twitches slightly. It could be a post-mortem spasm, they said. Then comes the part where I check the pulses. The camera captures the moment I step back, draw my weapon, but the angle doesn't show the body's face directly. You don't see the open eyes. You don't see that impossible head movement. My supervisor turned off the video and looked at me for a long moment. He asked if I was okay, if I had slept enough. I insisted that I wasn't imagining things, that I had seen what I had seen. The autopsy was performed the following morning. The medical examiner was a meticulous man named Dr. Patterson, who had worked for the state for 30 years. I was present during the examination, along with another officer. The body was removed from the coffin and placed on the metal table. Patterson began the standard procedure: measurements, photographs, external examination. There were no signs of trauma. There were no marks of violence. The preliminary cause of death, according to the false documents that accompanied the body, was heart failure. But there was no real medical documentation, no valid death certificate. When he made the Y-shaped incision to begin examining the internal organs, something came out. It wasn't clotted blood or normal bodily fluids. It was a thick black substance that oozed from the opening and fell to the floor with a heavy sound. Patterson recoiled, looked at me, then looked back at the body. He continued. He opened the chest cavity. Where the heart and lungs should have been, there was a shapeless mass of necrotic tissue enveloped in that same black substance. Patterson took a sample and placed it on a slide to examine under a microscope. What he saw left him speechless for a full 5 minutes. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. He said he had never seen anything like it in 3 decades of his career. The cells were dead, but there was some kind of parasitic activity happening. Something was feeding on the dead tissue, but it wasn't any known parasite. It wasn't bacterial, it wasn't fungal, it didn't fit into any known category. He collected samples and sent them to the state laboratory. The response came 2 weeks later, inconclusive. The substance defied classification. The case was forwarded to the CDC as a biological anomaly of unknown origin. I never received a response. Howard was released after 48 hours. He had no prior record, and technically he hadn't committed any crime other than transporting goods without proper documentation, which resulted in an administrative fine. He left the state soon after. I tried to contact him months later, but the number I had on file no longer existed. The body was cremated in court order 3 weeks after the seizure. After all samples had been collected, they said it was standard procedure for cases without confirmed identification and no family claiming it. But I know that wasn't the case. They wanted to get rid of it. I investigated the Las Vegas address Howard had mentioned. The industrial warehouse was empty, with no signs of recent occupancy. The phone number he had written down for the person who hired the service did not exist. The bank transfer came from an account that was closed the day after the payment. In the following 6 months, there were 3 other similar reports in different states. A hearse stopped in Nebraska with a coffin emitting strange noises. Another in Arizona, where the driver claimed the body had opened its eyes during transport. A third in Oregon, where the coffin was found empty at its destination, despite witnesses confirming there was a body inside when transport began. All cases were dismissed as mass hysteria or psychological problems on the part of the drivers. No federal investigation was opened. It's as if someone up there decided it was better to ignore it than to acknowledge that something inexplicable was happening. I still work on the road. I still work the graveyard shift. But now, every time I see a hearse on the highway, my stomach clenches. Every time I have to approach one for any reason, my hand automatically goes to my gun and stays there until the driver leaves, because I know what I saw that night. I know it wasn't a post-mortem spasm. It wasn't a hallucination caused by exhaustion. And I know that whatever was inside that body wasn't human. It was something using the body as a vehicle, as a host. And it was being transported from one place to another for some specific purpose. Sometimes, when I can't sleep, I find myself thinking, how many of these shipments go undetected? How many reach their destinations? And most frightening of all, what is the purpose of these shipments? The BODYCAM footage is filed in the police station's records. The case has a number, a file, reports, but nobody talks about it. It's as if there was a silent agreement among everyone involved to simply forget it happened. But I can't forget. I won't forget. Because if I forget, if I pretend it was nothing, then I'm saying that I can trust my senses less than I trust the convenience of a rational explanation. And a policeman who doesn't trust his own senses is a dead policeman. So I tell this story for whoever wants to listen, because someone needs to remember. Someone needs to keep a record of what is happening. Weaving through the empty roads of America in the middle of the night, when the only witness is a camera strapped to the chest of a weary police officer who pulled over the wrong vehicle at the wrong time.